Hi, everybody. Welcome to Discover College Soccer. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Coach Aron from Northern Oklahoma College. Welcome, Coach.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And no, folks, you don't have to adjust your TV. You have seen Coach before. We had the pleasure of speaking. I guess it was 2 years ago at this point.
Yes.
But now you're in Oklahoma, so excited to learn about what's going on there. Um, you're wrapping up the season. I know you got a playoff game tomorrow, so I appreciate you taking the time today. But I'm just curious, at this point in the season, I mean, at a two-year institution, you're really, I know, 1 year at a time almost on the recruiting trail. But how
Right.
much recruiting are you doing during the season, or maybe on a percentage basis, or is it all after the season's over? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it mainly comes after the season, and I usually do that anyways, even at a 4-year school. But I think it's even more important to do that at a junior college, just because you're seeing what players are going to stick around for another year that are first year players, and there's so much up in the air. I mean, you can pretty much count on the fact that you'll just keep recruiting the same player, the same positions over and over again. That's one thing you can count on. You're when if a player asks us, well, you're going to have a need for this position in whatever 2025 recruiting class, you can pretty much say, yeah, that's the way it is at junior college. You're going to always have a need for the positions. So that is one thing that is kind of a standard, or I would say, a constant. The ability to recruit during the season. For me, I always want to kind of wait and see how everyone has played this year, and then see who's coming back, and then before I make decisions about who I'm going to go out and recruit, and what positions are really, really important for us. What positions maybe are more important than another. So that's kind of the reason why I wait till the end of the season to do it. And during the season, all my focus is really on the team and us getting ready for our games and everything like that. And that does take up a lot of time too, as
Oh,
well.
yeah, for sure. Well, in terms of junior college, I mean, having spoken with a number of junior college coaches over the last few years, I think I've seen rosters of, somebody's had to walk into a season with 12 players, and I've seen rosters of, 40, 50 players.
Yeah.
What's kind of your ideal roster size for you guys there at Northern Oklahoma?
Well, we had 30 guys this year, and I really liked that. That was a good number. We had some injuries and things like that. We had one injury kind of right off the bat where we knew the player wasn't going to play for the rest of the season, and so that number has been good. For us, I don't think it's too many, and I don't think it's too few. We do a lot of our training goes to 11v11, so we need to have the players to be able to do that and work on the things that we do. And our roster has been like it was last year, very competitive, very close. So that is good too as well. So when we're training, we have a lot of competitiveness, and guys that are very close to playing. And there's a lot of movement on our roster as far as that happens throughout the year. Guys go from proving themselves and getting some playing time and things like that. So it's been a good situation here at Northern Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, when you're recruiting folks out there, where is it that you're looking? I see you got a mix of domestic and international. You're kind of equidistant from Tulsa and Oklahoma City, so some good hotbeds there. What's your preference where to
Yeah,
find
I
players?
mean, and we've gone down to Texas, and I'd like to get up into Kansas too as well a little bit, and see about Missouri. I got to become a little more familiar with soccer in that area. And you're right, Tulsa and Oklahoma City are two very good, areas for soccer. We've gotten some interest also from players in Arkansas. That's another border state. So you have Arkansas and Missouri and Texas and Oklahoma as I mean Kansas as border states. And so I think it's important to get those schools too. I mean, realistically, if someone wanted to come to the school and they were from, far away, we certainly would recruit them as long as they were open to coming, that far. We have a good situation with being able to offer players in-state tuition, even that are out of state. So that's a nice thing to have. And then we can kind of go from there with our scholarship money, on top of it. But we've got a good, I like our mix of players where we have about 50% are domestic players and 50 are international. And, each one brings something a little bit different. And I think that we're actually probably one of the few schools, at least in our region, that has that. And it definitely is something that I've enjoyed, having as far as a team to coach.
Okay. Well, do you work any ID camps or do you host your own or camps a part of your recruiting process at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have an ID camp coming up for our school, and we invite a lot of kids to come out for that. And then there is some ID camps that I do work. I worked last year. Worked at Oral Roberts ID camp. If there's any other camps that people usually invite me to, there's one that's going to happen down at Oklahoma City. I don't know if it's being put on by the actual Oklahoma City University down there. I think it's being done by a company. So I definitely will. I did one down in outside of Dallas too as well, for a club. And they had a bunch of college coaches come in. So for sure, I'm at ID camps, and trying to recruit there.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the college itself. You know, what drew you to it? What have you found to be some great things about it? Now that you've been there for a season.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I was in that unusual situation, as you knew, so it wasn't actually a draw. It was more of a, okay, I've enjoyed myself here after the first year. I want to stay type of situation, just with the late closing of Alderson Broadus and in July, and then me needing another position and being fortunate enough to be given one that was that enjoyable. So I've liked it in Oklahoma. We have a great facility here, and that was one of the reasons why soccer used to be at Tonkawa, which is about 45 minutes north of here. It's very close to the Kansas border, close to Wichita. And so they used to have soccer up in at that campus, and then they moved it down to Enid. There's already were sports teams here down at the Enid campus. They had basketball and baseball and softball. So they already had the infrastructure to support having sports teams on campus here. So when the soccer facility was built off campus, their intention was they wanted us to be using the facility and help promoting it. And it's a fantastic facility. It's got a championship field that's turf, has a press box and stands and things like that, lights. It's a fantastic facility. And then it also has 6 grass fields. It has an indoor field that's about 40 by 40. Inside, there's a conference room where we can do match analysis and have meetings. And then also we have locker rooms for us, a separate one for us and the women, and then visiting locker rooms separate for the men and the women too. So it's just a really fantastic uh, facility that we have, which is another perk of being able to coach here. And that was definitely weighed in my decision to want to stay here. Town of Enid is a pretty decent size. It's got about 50,000. So there's definitely things to do and things like that. And we're not too far away from Tulsa and Oklahoma City and even Wichita. We're only an hour and a half away from all 3 of those cities. So it's a good location. And we have a good thing going for us at the school.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, do me a favor. Well, I mean, this is a little bit of an odd week because it's tournament time, but let's say a few weeks back, walk me through what a typical week's going to look like for a player in terms of, when are classes, meals, game cadence, what's somebody doing if it's in season?
Well, I'll start off with Monday since everyone thinks of that as the start of the week. So Monday would be usually a day where we're coming off, um, playing in a game on Sunday. So we do some recovery work with our guys that are have played a decent amount of minutes. The guys that didn't play usually go through a training session with us, and it's a good time for those guys to prove themselves in the group that they're training with. And that's the way we frame it. That's the way I frame it to the guys. Sometimes when you get into the season, you're focused on the group that's mainly been playing. So your ability to kind of pick up and see who's developing is a little bit tougher. So it's a good time for them to do that. And those sessions are usually pretty good. So that would be kind of a Monday practice for us. Tuesday, most of the time we're preparing for our game the next day because we generally play on Wednesdays. So it is a shorter practice, and our focus is on getting ready for our opponent. How we're going to play versus our opponent, sticking within our style of play. We might review some set pieces as well. It just kind of depends where we're at with all that stuff. But generally, that's a shorter practice for us. And then Wednesday we're playing. Thursday is usually the day off for our guys. And we ask them to do stuff on their own, whether it be recovery work for the guys that played a lot, or it's fitness for the guys that aren't playing as much to keep their level up. And then on Friday, that's usually our big practice day because we're not playing till Sunday. And so Friday's a pretty intense practice for us, pretty big on physical demand. Tactically, we're starting to look at what we're going to do on Sunday. And so that practice tends to be, a pretty intense one. And then Saturday, same thing as a Tuesday practice would be the day before the game, a little bit shorter, still touching on some things to work on. We may have worked on the attacking or the defending side the day before, and so now we're working on the opposite on Saturday, and then we're getting back at it on Sunday, playing our match. So we practice in the afternoons on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we're generally from 2:30 to 4:30. And then on Tuesday and Thursday, if we practice, because Thursday we normally don't, but we usually practice in the morning. The guys prefer practicing in the morning rather than the evening, which is when we would have had to practice. So we practice, and our school's a little unusual because we have classes that start at 7:30. So we generally start practice at about 5:45 on those Tuesdays. Or Thursdays when we practice. And then Saturday is usually a morning practice too, as well. So the majority of the time our guys have either their evening or the rest of the day free to take care of their schoolwork and everything like that.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the team. I mean, do you have any other soccer staff assistant coaches? Are there other staff in the athletic department or academically that help out with the team at all?
Have me and the women's coach are assistant coaches for each other. So that's what we have as far as that goes.
Okay. Yeah, I did that back in my day. I totally remember those situations.
Yeah,
But
we're pretty flexible with each other, so it works out well.
yeah, it can be fun. That way you get a little bit of the guy side and the girl side too, which is
Right,
good.
right.
Um, well, how would you describe your style of coaching, the style of play that you're looking to play there?
Well, we want guys that are really committed and dedicated to the way that we want to play. It's not a question of the way I'm asking guys to play being the right or the wrong way. It's a question of it being the right way for our team. And that's probably one of the biggest adjustments I think that players, especially their first year, go through, that really happens and it really matters. You see players kind of say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you can see them kind of revert back to things maybe they've done at another level and on the teams they played at. And it just doesn't fit into our style of play. So that's a really big component, and I'm very demanding about that and very emphatic about guys doing that because we're going to work together as a team, all 11 guys pulling in the right direction, and that's what that means to me. Is being able to do that. We do make adjustments and things like that. We've played different formations this year. We've played different formations from one game to the next. Style of play always remains the same, and guys always understand that. I expect guys to be student of the game. I send out a lot of information to our guys, video clips of us playing, of the team we're going to play playing, why we have chosen a certain amount of tactics that we have. If we play a team that plays a high back line, we might be a little bit more direct that game. We're still going to keep possession of the ball and maintain that integrity because that's always something we want to do because we want to try to control the game with possession. But from one game to the next, depending upon how the other team is going to defend us, especially when we get into our region play where we're playing teams twice in the season, which is something that happens with us that makes it a little more unique. We really focus on how can we take our style of play and tweak it just enough that we're going to be able to, be able to attack against this team, but not totally go opposite of what we normally do. So, and we want our guys to also be able to do that, through the course of the game. So we practice that. We've played against teams that played a high line in the first half and then dropped that line in the second half. And so our guys know if the team's playing a high back line, we're going to be a little bit more direct. And then they also know if the team's sitting back a little bit more, that will play the ball a little bit more into feet at the back line and then try to combine and go forward. So as we go throughout the season, our guys kind of know that's adjustment to make. We anticipate a team doing one thing, and we're always ready to make the adjustment to do something else. And so I give them a lot of information, not just in training, but outside of training. So I really expect our guys to be students of the game. That's another thing I think that is kind of new for players, coming from playing at the club or the high school level. You might find an exception to that every once in a while, but most players are not used to putting that time in off the field, looking at videos, listening to what's being said and really understanding that the best players that are going to get out on the field are the ones that show that. And that's really what ends up happening when you look at a season. If you probably strictly just pick the best players based on, skill or something like that on our team, that wouldn't necessarily be the guys that are going to be our starting 11. The mind, I told our guys the other day in training, your mind is the most important thing that you can develop as a soccer player. And I know probably a lot of people think it's your feet or something like that, but it's really your mind. And so that's what we want from our guys, be willing to do.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Well, one thing that people are always wondering, okay, this the soccer season, it's heavy in the fall, but you're doing a ton. So what does that non-traditional season look like, the spring? So what are your players doing in the spring? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm definitely someone philosophically that believes once the season's over, the guys need a break mentally and physically and psychologically. I think it's good. A lot of the guys, are into working out, so they'll keep themselves somewhat fit, which I encourage them to do on their own. That's kind of just what they would do in a routine normally. Even if they hadn't just played like a long season like our own. And then once we come back for second semester, which we start in the beginning of January, we start getting together and we start doing some running, 3 or 4 times a week. And we do some lifting too as well. So we get a little bit of a base before we go out and we start to actually train. And then once we get to February, we start actually going out and practicing and, training probably usually around 4 times a week. We still keep up with our strength training too as well during that time. And then really once we start getting into March, if we can get a game in before spring break, we usually have an early spring break in the beginning of March. So sometimes if we can get a game in early spring break, we'll do that. If not, then we wait to play our games in after spring break, and then we're playing 4 or 5 matches during the spring, which we're allowed to do. This past year, we played a number of Division II teams, NCAA Division II teams. We played an NAI team. And so that's the type of level of competition we want to play. We want to play other schools that, are going to have players returning. At a JUCO, you could end up with a lot of the kids even leaving at break. So I try to schedule 4-year teams to make sure we're going to get a good match in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Coach, I really appreciate the time and wish you luck in your playoff
Thanks.
match tomorrow. But
Thanks.
as we leave, I got one last question. If you had one piece of advice for anybody going through the recruiting process right now, what would that be?
You got to put the work in. It's not going to just come to you. You can be a great player and coaches not know about you. Coaches cannot possibly know about every player. They can't even know about the majority of the players out there. If you have a strong desire to play in college, then you need to, figure out what type of school you want to go to, location, size, level of play. I mean, I'll add one more piece in here because I've coached. This is my first time I've ever coached junior college soccer, as you know. And I've been really pleasantly surprised with the level of play. I mean, I would say it's very, very close to, NCAA Division II NAI level of play. And so I would encourage, players to leave that as an option. One of the valuable things that players get out of doing that is generally you're going to play either your first year or your second year. So that experience that you get is something that really can help you. There's obviously advantages and disadvantages to going to a junior college, but I do think in general that ability to play your first couple of years does end up helping you more than it hurts you to not be out of school for at 4 years consistently. And I know a lot of the good schools like for players to come and go to junior college because they don't see that player necessarily being able to play their first or second year. So they get a more polished player when they comes in their junior year and they're actually more ready to play at that level because of that experience. But I'd encourage players to get out there and do the work and contact coaches if they're serious. Even if you have your name like on a recruiting website, it doesn't mean a coach is going to know about you and going to go through all the players. I mean, there's thousands of players on these recruiting websites. So you really got to put the work in if you want to play soccer in college and contact coaches and get your video out there. And also, figuring out from there, a lot of those coaches are going to want you to come to ID camps. Like at our ID camp, we actually bring our players out to play with the guys that are the recruits, because we want to see how they're going to do against our players. Now, that's one thing we're a little bit more fortunate to be able to do at the JUCO level than other schools are. So NCAA schools might not be able to do that, but we can. And it's a good experience for us because we're looking at you and we're saying, okay, this is what it's like to play against a college player. How do you do at this point?
Yeah,
So
for sure. Well, really appreciate it, Coach. Best of luck, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch. All right. Take care
thank
of
you for
yourself.
having me.